Hi, everybody. This is Sherry Prindle, and I hope you enjoyed your half of a program on how to handle emotionally charged situations. It was very funny because right at lunch, I had kind of given a wonderful strategy for how to stop an emotional response in emotionally charged situations so that you could come back into the game and succeed. And since a lot of us didn't get a chance to come back after lunch, I wanted to run that little formula with you right now to make sure that you got that in its entirety. So let me go ahead and share my screen. A stressor is something asking us to respond to it. Lots of things ask us to respond. A stressor is just that. Now, stress is your body's reaction to a perceived threat. The key word here is usually perceived. So much goes on around us that's not an actual threat to life and limb, but the survival mechanism sees different as dangerous, is on hyper alert, and much of the time looks at things that are not truly a threat to our safety, like a deadline or a coworker who doesn't say good morning, looks at those as threats. So the way it all works together is the fight, flight, or freeze response kicks in when some event sparks a perception of threat. After about a 10-second window, boom, the fight, flight, or freeze response kicks in, and we may be emotionally escalated in our responses. So if we want to stop responding emotionally with that fight, flight, or freeze response, because how many things in the world would fighting, fleeing, or freezing be the best way to handle, then what we want to do is the event happens, we still perceive it as a threat, and really a lot of people say, well, why don't you just stop perceiving it as a threat? Because the perception of threat is a habitual response. It's not like you're consciously choosing to perceive it as a threat. You can control it, but mostly only retroactively. So we'll come back to that. If we want to circumvent the activation of the stress response, we have a 10-second window to be able to kill the response, so to speak, like throw the switch, right? So in order for that to happen, we need to, the minute we perceive something as a threat, become aware that we've perceived something as a threat. And the good news is that your body automatically sends you a warning. Boom, the minute you perceive something as a threat, something begins to happen. Your heart rate might start to increase. You might start feeling hot under the collar, sweaty palms. You might clench your jaw, your shoulders, or your fist. I know I get really strong tightness in my stomach. Your breathing might change. You might get an interesting little headache or backache. You may find yourself tearing up or sweating. That is your body warning you that you have just perceived something as a threat. So train yourself to notice that. And when you notice it, you know that you have a few seconds. Oh, wait, the event still happened. The perception of threat still happened, but we what? Notice our body's warning and distract ourselves out of our heads. It is in our heads that that response is happening. So in order to distract yourself out of your head, you go somewhere else. Easiest place to go is out into the world. And the method that I learned to use to get out of my head and into the world was to notice colors in my environment. Oh, look, the walls are blue, the carpet is gray, the trim is brown. It doesn't take very long. When you start to notice your physical symptoms subside, you know you're out of the woods. You killed the switch, and now you are not going to go into fight, flight, or freeze response. You can focus back in on what was happening around you. Now that's great, and it will work. In the long run, though, wouldn't it be nice to retrain your perception of threat to not be triggered so easily? So later, when you have some time, recognize the opportunity to train yourself to not be so easily triggered by asking yourself, what event triggered my response? And then as you identify the event, ask yourself, what is it about this event that has me perceiving it as a threat? Sometimes it's because it was connected to some childhood memory or previous experience. We talked about those things. Sometimes it really is just that it's very different and therefore throws us off. Sometimes it's really an area that we just haven't had a lot of training or experience in, so we're not quite sure what to do. but you look at that trigger and you ask yourself, what can I do to reframe that so that I don't perceive it as a threat anymore, so that even though this technique works, you don't have to continue using it, because not as often anyway, because you're not perceiving so many things as a threat.